Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, our March Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. The newspapers yesterday and today have given us the news, if we didn't get it through other media, that the FBI has now evaluated that the COVID virus came from a lab in Wuhan. Are we all surprised about that? The Energy Department has made a similar statement. There are, however, some people who were involved in an alternative story who are in the government who are still maintaining that they are right, but the evidence is accumulating that they were wrong and the government of the United States was wrong in many respects in that COVID operation. And countries like Sweden and Spain, which didn't shut down, had results that were approximately equivalent as to those that we had here in the United States. It's not just a bad mistake. It cost the American people probably trillions of dollars to shut down this country. And who benefited from that? Which is an interesting question that we should ponder. I encourage you to live tweet today's events. The hashtag is on the screen, which you can read. In 2022, your Leadership Institute in 2023 has already trained 15,173 conservatives at 719 separate programs. And since 1979, the Leadership Institute has trained over 258,000 activists, students, and leaders. You have before you at the table the Leadership Institute schedule for our training month. Please take a moment to review these schools and consider attending one or sending a friend to a training. If you are watching online, please visit our website at leadershipinstitute.org/training to see upcoming online and in-person trainings. Now my pleasure to introduce Ian Cruz, who will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ian is the campus reform intern. He hails from the Woodlands, Texas, and Lisbon, Portugal. Ian's dad is Portuguese and has spent his life living in Lisbon and moved to the United States to attend Georgetown University. Ian is currently attending Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service, where he's pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree in international politics. Ian is the vice president of the Georgetown University College Republicans and hosts their podcast, The Elephant in the Room, a regular discussion about issues from the conservative movement from a collegiate perspective. Ian previously interned in both the U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate for Congressman Jason Smith and Senator Tom Cotton, respectively. Additionally, he helped get Glenn Youngkin elected as Virginia governor by campaigning and leading a student effort in Fairfax County. Ian?
Thank you, Morton, for that incredible introduction. Now, if you'll bow your heads, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, we thank you for the food in front of us. We thank you for bringing us all together on this fine March morning. We thank our three very special guests for joining us today and the great work that they're doing in Peru. Lord, we thank you for the Leadership Institute, for all the great work that it does in training young conservatives and conservatives all across this country. And we hope that you'll bless all of us in this room to live in accordance with your will, and that we can all live better lives. Amen. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to say a short prayer in my other native tongue, Portuguese. So, em nome do Pai, do Filho e do Espírito Santo, eu vos adoro, meu Deus, e vos amo com todo o coração. Dou-vos graças por me teres criado, feito cristão e conservado nesta noite. Ofereço-vos as ações deste dia, fazei que sejam todas segundo a vossa santa vontade, para a maior glória vossa. Preservei-me do pecado e de todo o mal. A vossa graça seja sempre comigo e com todos que me são caros. Amém. Em nome do Pai, do Filho e do Espírito Santo. So now please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
In my travels in Latin America and elsewhere, I have noticed an interesting phenomenon, and I'm not quite sure what the reason for it is, but I have found that the Portuguese speakers tend to be able to understand the spoken Spanish language pretty well, but people whose native language is Spanish sometimes have real difficulty understanding Portuguese. Perhaps somebody can explain to me why that is the case. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you one of our key people around here, Carol Cox. She's going to give our programs report. Carol Way Cox is the Director of External Affairs at the Leadership Institute. In this position, Carol works with her team to tell the conservative world about Leadership Institute training and resources, and they are available thanks to Leadership Institute donors. She also spearheads our partnerships with other conservative organizations, and together they work to train conservatives, young and old, to win. Carol has worked at the Leadership Institute for more than 10 years in various roles, including her starting roles managing LI's digital media and fundraising trainings. Prior to working here, Carol managed new media and events at Hillsdale College, their Alan P. Kirby Center for Constitutional Studies and Citizenship. She acted as new media manager at the Independent Women's Forum, a nonprofit dedicated to limited government, and was a recruitment assistant at Professional Oklahoma Educators. Carol received her Bachelor of Arts in Political Economy from Hillsdale College, and she and her Coast Guard husband, Chip, may love to travel the world, but Carol is still a Texan at heart. Carol?
Thank you, Morton. It's great to be here with all of you. Did I hear some Texans in the crowd? Uh-huh. Well, welcome to DC. So my work at Leadership Institute is really neat. I love working at LI and being able to travel across the country, connect conservative organizations and conservatives with Leadership Institute training and resources across the country. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what's happened in the past week and a half and what's about to happen as well. I've worked at Leadership Institute for, as Morton said, more than 10 years. I won't tell you how old I was when I started, so you can't guess where I am now. But from that first year starting at Leadership Institute, I was at a conference in Florida and had a person come up to me at Leadership Institute's training at a conference, and they just told me, "Oh, you work at Leadership Institute," and I get two responses. when I'm at conferences at a booth and someone realizes that I introduce myself, I say, hey, I'm Carol Waycox. I work at Leadership Institute. And they're like, oh my goodness, yes, I get your emails. Because Leadership Institute is everywhere across the nation in the conservative movement. And then the other response I get is some version of what I heard from this gentleman in Florida back more than 10 years ago. Leadership Institute had helped him. He'd taken campaign management school training because he'd seen that his local community needed solid leadership and it didn't have it. And he had a friend who he wanted to run for office. And so he came and took campaign management school training. And the week-long school that's really intensive, and then went back home and ran the campaign for his friend who won. And now they have solid conservative leadership in their local community. And I hear a version of that story everywhere I go in the nation. It's really neat to hear Leadership Institute grads across the movement. So this past weekend, I was in Austin, Texas at the Young Conservatives of Texas conference with Ian Cruz was there because he's also a Texan. And a bunch of students, so a bunch of college students who came up to the booth and came up to Leadership Institute's campus staff at receptions and at the back of our youth leadership workshop training. And we're just very excited about working with Leadership Institute's campus staff. And I hadn't met any of these students before, but our campus staff clearly had and had a solid connection with them. And these college students were very excitedly asking for youth leadership workshops to be brought to their campus and for speaker resources so that they could host an event. And it was just really neat to see because even Texas, unfortunately, has very leftist college campuses. And those students could feel isolated and alone, but they don't because they're building groups on campus with conservative organizations like Young Conservatives of Texas and Leadership Institute resources partnering. And so that's really neat to see. But then also, fast forward to a couple of days to today, and Leadership Institute will be at CPAC this week as well. CPAC starts today, this evening. Who here is going to CPAC? Nice. All right, if you don't already have a ticket, you can still go to one of the things that I'm about to tell you about. Don't worry, CPAC told me I could tell you you don't have to have a ticket to come. The CPAC activism training that Leadership Institute has supported and has been actively working with them on is happening this evening at 5 p.m. at National Harbor. You'll see Morton at CPAC. You'll see your speakers today at CPAC and more than 40 staff. I see one of our speakers for the activism training, Trent England from Oklahoma, is in the room. And so many Leadership Institute volunteer faculty, staff, and grads who will be training CPAC activists on how to take what they hear at CPAC home and actually act, not just sit and listen to policy and then go home not able to do anything as conservatives, but kind of like those students this past week, they're able to build their communities a conservative movement of their own and change local politics. So that's exciting. If you look on your table, you've got a flyer underneath that yellow one that you have there. It's about what's happening at CPAC. You'll see a couple of other things Leadership Institute's doing. That first one on the list is the CPAC activism training. You're invited, even if you don't have a ticket, just come over to National Harbor. We start at 5 p.m. this evening. And the other two things you do have to have a CPAC ticket for, we're doing career consultations and organizing the CPAC job fair, as well as so much recruitment so that we can plug good conservatives into Leadership Institute training and resources and make them more effective in their local communities. So I hope to see you there.
Thank you very much, Carol. I want to again thank the donors, many of whom are in this room. We could not be doing what we're doing, achieving what we're doing for conservative principles and for our country, were it not for the generous support and the growing support of Leadership Institute donors. We are definitely in the period of our greatest growth, programmatically, financially, and even physically. We've recently acquired an additional floor in the office building next door. We already had the second floor, and now we have the 7th floor, adding another 10,000 square feet to our office facilities. It is quite remarkable in terms of numbers of donors and in terms of income. In 2020, the Leadership Institute revenue was $20.7 million. In 2021, our revenue was $30 million. Last year, the Leadership Institute revenue was $39 million. And we are doing better financially thus far this year than in any previous year. We're in a period of great growth, and we could not achieve that without donor support. Now, to introduce our speakers. My personal intern now is Kirk D. George III. He is from Corpus Christi, Texas, and currently attends Texas A&M at Corpus Christi, and where he's pursuing a degree in political science. Before entering college, Kirk served in the U.S. Coast Guard for 4 years and was stationed in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Kirk is the president of his Turning Point USA chapter at college, and he serves as a member of the recruitment committee for his college's chapter of the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity, and he was pleased to find that I too am a Phi Gamma Delta for my college here. It didn't affect his getting the job, but we learned about that afterwards. In his free time, Kirk enjoys fishing, spending time with his fraternity brothers, and working on his 1974 Volkswagen Thing. After graduating, Kirk hopes to pursue his Juris Doctor at St. Mary's School of Law. Kirk, come here and introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Morton. That was an incredible introduction. Thank you. Before I introduce the speakers, I just want to make a housekeeping remark. I know a lot of y'all have some questions. If you could, please wait till the end to ask your questions, and somebody will bring a microphone to you so you can ask them. I'd ask that you please wait until you get the microphone so everybody can hear. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Congressman Alejandro Cavaro. He was born and raised in Lima, Peru. A law graduate of the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru, he was elected congressman for Peru's capital, Lima, representing 10 million inhabitants, winning the votes of a new generation of Peruvian conservatives. Alejandro's agenda in the Peruvian parliament includes individual liberty, limited government, and free markets. In 2019, he interned for the Leadership Institute president and founder, Morton Blackwell. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Eduardo Dibos. He works as an advisor for Congressman Cavaro in Peruvian Parliament. He also served as campaign manager for Mr. Cavaro for Congress efforts. He garnered 30,000 plus votes. He is a law graduate from Universidad del Pacífico in Lima, Peru. Also, Eduardo served as Morton Blackwell's intern in the early 2020, immediately prior to the pandemic. Finally, I'd like to introduce Mr. Bernardo Picasso. He currently works in the Lima office of the law firm Baker McKenzie. Previously, he was also Morton Blackwell's intern in 2018, Alongside Alejandro and Eduardo, they founded the Leadership Institute Peru to promote in his country LI's mission of increasing the number and effectiveness of conservative activists. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Morton, for the kind invitation to speak this morning with all of you. Thank you for doing the great job you're doing at LI and helping LI visit its mission. And of course, we are compromised with it. What I wanted to tell you and explain you I try to do a brief presentation to explain to all of you what's the current situation in Peru. Of course, as every Latin American country, explain it, it's simple, it's very hard. But I'll try to do my best, and my apologies for my bad English if it comes some word that you don't understand. First, of course, this is my country, Peru. It's in South America. That's our flag, that's our national symbols. And I'm going to tell you what's the story of Peru for the last 30 years and what's the current situation that my country is struggling in the fight against the left communism in Latin America. Thank you. I think you hear me with this better. Okay. Next one, please. Peru in the 80s was almost a failed state. We had, before 1990, around 60% of poverty and one of the highest inflation rates in the world. If something costed in 1985 1 sol, which would be the equivalent to $1, in 1990 it costed 2 million soles. So the inflation was one of the highest in the world. We had a bloody terrorist group called Shining Path, which you could see there. It was a terrorist, communist, Maoist group linked to ties with China. That's the leader, Abimael Guzman. And they, in their terrorist attacks, they killed more than 80,000 Peruvians during the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. This guy, Guzman, was absolutely crazy. He believed to be the fourth source of communism in the world after Marx, Lenin, Mao, and him, you know? So you could imagine how big his ego was. And he was a bloody terrorist that put Peru in a very hard and difficult situation during all the 90s. So we were fighting a war against terrorist communists. We were having one of the worst economy, basically controlled by the state. The state-owned companies lost in Peru more than $10,000 million during the 80s. And all of this was, I would say resolved, but you know, there came a president there, Alberto Fujimori, who you might have heard of him. He became president in 1990 and changed our Peruvian constitution basically for a constitution that respects free markets, individual liberties, the rule of law. And he basically changed the country. He captured Abimael Guzman and put him in jail, where you can see he is. And he just died last year, died in prison. Yeah? And he finally defeated Shining Path and basically changed Peru's history. I mean, I think there are few presidents in Peru that really had a before and after, and Fujimori is one of them, I think. So Fujimori basically changed the constitution for good. With the help of a world-known economist such as Hernando de Soto, you might hear of him. He helped Fujimori to conduce Peru to a way of respecting free markets and individual liberty and rule of law. Basically, this new constitution, second please, next please. With that constitution began Peru's story of success. You know, Peru is probably one of the most impressive economic successes of Latin America during the last 30 years. Because of the new constitution, Peru experienced one of the most successful economic times in all its history. We significantly increased our budget like never in our history. For example, in 1991, when Fujimori was president, Peru's budget was $3,616 million, which is not that much. But in 2023, our budget was $56,000 million. So we increased our budget like never before because of economic freedom. Spending in healthcare, for example, in 1995 was only $300 million. In 2023, it was $6,000 million. Spending in education was only $1,000 million in 1995. Today is $11,000 spending in education. So Peru basically changed dramatically. You see there's a graph of reduction in poverty over the last 15 years in Peru, from around 60% to 20% before the pandemic. So this was a very successful story, but as every successful story, you know, in Peru, the political elites in Peru thought that the economic development and the economic growth would do the political work, and it's not like that. They forgot to tell the narrative of the success. They forgot to do the political work so that Peruvians could get in their minds the importance of freedom and what actually freedom does for their own lives. And they thought, okay, maybe if people is, you know, less poor and is living better, they will suddenly realize that free markets work, and, you know, we always have to vote for conservative, for the right wing. But it wasn't like that. The left, on the contrary hand, they began to work the narrative. And they said that the model, that the economic model, okay, it was reducing poverty, but it was also increasing inequality, you know. And they put myths like, okay, that the neoliberalism, that they call it, was defunding health and defunding education, and it was absolutely false. You know, it tripled the budget in health, it tripled the budget in education, but we lost the narrative. Next, please. So I wanted to tell you what happened very shortly and how we got in the situation we are here today. Because in Peru, when I interned here at LI, for the first time I read a quote from Ronald Reagan that it got into my mind because it explained basically what happened in Peru. And Reagan once said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction," he said. "We didn't pass it through our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free." That's exactly what happened in Peru. I mean, I was born in 1992. I was baptized the day that Abimael Guzman was captured. So my generation, which is now around 40% of Peru that has less than 30 years, had never lived in a country with terrorism, with high inflation, you know. So we grow up in a country that was sort of better and better every time. So we thought that freedom was for granted, you know? And that's a big mistake. You should never give freedom for granted, because that's exactly what happened. So 30 years of young generations like mine were brainwashed by the left in Peruvian universities, telling them that the model was wrong, that you know, Peru was actually a story of failure instead of a story of success. And we lost the political and we lost the narrative. And that was basically what happened in Peru for the last 30 years. And besides that, on 2016, besides losing the narrative, we got another big problem, which was that the right in Peru got so much power and used it very badly. You'd see a picture there of President Kuczynski, who I actually used to work with in Peru, and Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of Alberto Fujimori. She founded the biggest right-wing political party in Peru. And basically, Kuczynski, who was a right-wing businessman, banker, he got the executive power, and Keiko Fujimori won the majority in Congress. Actually, an overwhelming majority of 73 out of 130 congressmen in Peru. So she had a big majority. But they fought because she wanted to be president, so she lost the election against Kuczynski. That's both of them in the presidential debate. She lost the election, but she won Congress, and an overwhelmingly majority in Congress. So what happened then was basically that they, because of personal issues, they fought, you know? And so she basically ended up impeaching Kuczynski with actually no real reason, because they were, you know, on the same side of the battle. But basically, because of personal stuff, she ended up basically impeaching Kuczynski. And then Kuczynski's vice president allied with Fujimori, which is Martin Vizcarra over there to the right. He became president. Then Vizcarra, this is a funny story, because then Vizcarra betrayed Fujimori and dissolved Congress and called for new congressional elections, you know. So she said, oh, you have too many congressmen, we dissolve you. So he dissolved Congress, called for new elections. We Peruvians go to vote and elect a new Congress, and then this new Congress impeach Vizcarra and throw him out of office and put the president of Congress as president of the Republic. But then obviously there was a lot of protests over Manuel Merino, which is the guy here to the right. So Congress had to overthrow Merino and then name a new one, which was Francisco Sagasti over here to the right. So we ended up having in 5 years, 4 presidents in 5 years, you know. Very turbulent times the last years in Peru. So alongside losing the narrative against the left, the right was incapable of unifying, of getting together, of knowing that the enemy is not next to you but in front of you. So I think those are two very important lessons that we learned in Peru. And so the consequence of all this, next please, the consequence of this was the victory of Pedro Castillo, who was the president of Peru until very recently. Pedro Castillo won the election in the middle of all this chaos with a very left-wing speech calling for a new constitutional assembly in Peru, calling basically to imitate the Chavista model of Venezuela with stay-no companies, with controlled prices, with all this presence of the state in the economy. And basically, he couldn't do that. He haven't done that, thank God, because of our constitution. Because our constitution sets certain rules that you can't have own state companies if there's not a necessity absolutely approved by Congress and things like that. So basically, he couldn't do that. That's why he wanted to get rid of the constitution and called for a new constitutional assembly. Basically, all the left regimes in Latin America had called for a constitutional assembly, basically to change the economic rules and keep and control and maintain their own power and basically stay in power for as much as they want. That's what Chavez did in Venezuela. That's what Morales did in Bolivia, in Nicaragua, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, Castillo wanted to do that, but Castillo had a problem. He won the government, but he didn't win majority in Congress. We, the opposition, the right-wing opposition, had majority in Congress, and we knew perfectly what he was trying to do in our country, and we tried to stop it since the day one. And we impeached him 3 times. But it wasn't easy to impeach a president because you need a big amount of votes in Congress, around 87 out of 130, which is not that easy to get. But it was evident that he was trying to destroy the country, and he was very corrupt. I mean, Castillo was very corrupt. And basically what he tried to do was to just take over the country. We didn't let him. We impeached him 3 times. And before the 3rd impeachment, he did a coup d'etat. He basically went on television and said, okay, he felt so surrounded that he said, okay, I have no other alternative, I'm going to do a coup d'etat. And I feel proud to say today that Peruvian institutions and Peruvian democracy survived this coup. The military didn't align with him, they aligned with Congress, they aligned with the respect of law. So he couldn't achieve its goal. We impeach him immediately. We throw him out of power. He's now in jail, in prison for the crime of the coup, of rebellion. No? He was arrested by his own bodyguards, by his own police bodyguards. So I feel proud to tell all of you that Peruvian institutions and democracy prevail because we have a Congress that has fought for our freedoms. And now the new president is his vice president, Dina Boluarte, who would you think, okay, if she was the vice president of Castillo, maybe she's leftist too. But it's not that story, because she needed Congress in order to maintain and stabilize her government. So basically, she abandoned Castillo, and now she's governing, trying to stabilize the country, respect the Constitution, and respect rule of law and Congress. So she's doing a fine job. She's not the best president. I mean, she obviously comes from Castillo's line, so she's not, perfect. But I think she's doing a good job right now. She's trying to stabilize the country. But Castillo spent almost 2 years organizing all the left on the streets. So after Castillo was thrown out of power and she swore as president, basically what happened was a series of very violent and radical protests all over Peru. They try to take simultaneously 4 or 5 airports at the same time. That doesn't happen spontaneously. That happens very organizedly. And the ties of the radical left in Peru are very deep with illegal mining and drug trafficking, and the Bolivians on the south border who try to influence Peruvian politics all the time, because they obviously want roads to the sea because they don't have sea, so they want roads for their illegal economies through Peru. So basically they influence a lot the politics on the south of Peru. And to finish, because I don't want to take a lot of time, basically the current situation was very violent protests in Peru. They actually took a policeman on their own patrol and burned him alive. That's how the left acts in Peru. You should remember that Peru had a history of very violent terrorism, so the left knows how to do that. So basically, right now, our situation is very difficult, because we're trying to stabilize the country. We're trying to give our president, a horizon to do her work, to stabilize the nation, to work with Congress in resolving Peruvians' problems. But we got a very violent left on the street trying to burn everything up, and that's our current situation. And they also want to call for elections right now. They don't want to respect mandates until 2026 because they want elections now, because they're organized now. And they're moving the streets now, and they have money from illegal economies right now. So basically what they're trying to do is call for elections right now so that they can win again, and maybe you can get rid of Castillo once, but maybe twice, that's more difficult. So that's the current situation. Basically, to finish, 3 lessons we got. First, you need to win the narrative. That was a big mistake on Peru. The Peruvian elites and my generation was brainwashed by the left in colleges. That should not happen, because economic development doesn't do the political work. You have to tell people what they want to defend first. Second, you need to unite. The right needs to be united. The enemy is not next to you. The enemy is in front of you. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that you should never surrender to violence. You should never surrender to terrorism. These guys have objectives of destabilize everything, burn up everything, and if you give them a little bit, they would go for more. They always go for more. That's what happened in Peru. We give them a little bit, and they go for more, and they go for more. You have to cut it immediately. So that would be the three lessons I could tell you, and obviously ask for your support to our democratic and freedom cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alejandro, for your words. Thank you to the Leadership Institute. Thank you to Morton, and thank you for being here in this early morning. Next, please. Being here reminds me vividly of my time as an intern only 3 years ago, this exact spring class. Actually, my friends from that class told me they were coming. However, I only see one on the back. Shout out to Alex. And it was a truly amazing experience. As Kirk said, it was just prior to the pandemic. And as a fun fact, I was envied by my whole class of interns because I had a truly amazing experience that was going with Morton to the Briar Patch, just the two of us. So it was a truly amazing experience that I will treasure for the rest of my life, spending some quality time with you, Morton. So I'm here to share with you some very important things that connects what Alejandro just told you to you. And I want to answer 3 questions. The first one is how all this affects you. What's the links with what is happening in Peru and Latin America with the United States? Next, please. So this is the current landscape. I titled The New Red Wave in Latin America. So this is what you got just south of your border. Of course, red is a color you don't want here. It's communist red. So out of more than 20 countries in Latin America, from the most northern part of Mexico to the most southern part of Chile and Argentina, the vast majority, 80% of Latin American countries are ruled by socialists, including Peru as well, our country. And actually one of the most important other countries and biggest countries such as Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia. And of course, you've got the leftist dictatorships that we've always had, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. So this is what the enemy looks like. This is what we are fighting against, I'm sorry. And in this, I want to share a quote from a very wise man who was said in a 2004 address titled Unfinished Business for the Conservative Movement. Do you know who it is? It was Morton. Morton already in 2004, maybe you knew this was going to happen. And in this address, you said the following, and I want to share with you that looks like a premonition. Anyone who believes the United States can survive in the long run if surrounded by a world full of socialist countries is badly mistaken. So this is what you got. This is what is very near to you. And I believe that the only way to keep America being the most successful nation in the world, keep America being strong, prosperous, and a free nation, is to surround itself of countries that share its same conservative values. Currently, this is clearly not the case. So even though we're being ruled by socialists right now as I am showing you, I strongly believe Latin Americans are not socialists. We are not socialists. We don't have the same culture as in communist China, as in Russia. We have a very similar culture and way of life as the American way of life. We are conservative. We promote the free markets. We are for limited government. So there are many links to connect, many things the US needs to take more advantage and really be a role model, because Latin Americans also want to benefit from the prosperous recipe for success of America. I think that's one of the paths Latin Americans want to be successful just as you. And we feel much more related to you than to any other big country there is. So this is our landscape. This is what we look like. And next, please. Now we need to ask ourselves, what is our common rival? We have a rival here in the US, and we share that same exact rival in Peru, in Latin America, and of course, I think the whole world. Next, please. Of course, it is China. Of course. Here you see in the picture one of our former presidents, Ollantumala, with still President Xi Jinping. This is a picture taken 10 years ago, however, he's still ruling the country, of course. And China is taking over Peru. And this is the same in Latin America. It has happened already in Africa, where they used to give credit to African countries, and of course the African countries were not able to repay that credit, so now they're prey to what China wants from them. And they are investing very strategically in some businesses that I want to show you. On the upper left, you see what is Peru's most important mining project, which is called Las Bambas. It is a copper mine, and Peru is the second biggest country with the most copper deposits in the world after Chile. So this is a huge project. It is the biggest private investment in Peru, and is owned by a Chinese company. So our biggest commodity in Peru, which gives the most jobs to Peruvians, is run by China. Secondly, you see on the upper right a port, which is called the Chancay Megaport. It is going to be the biggest port in the Latin American Pacific, and is also owned by a Chinese company. So you see, these industries are very strategic, right? They're on mining, they're on ports, they're on the roads, they're in the hydroelectrics. And what you see on the right here at the left down, it's a lithium mine. So they're also messing with the lithium, which some people say it's a commodity of the future. Phone batteries are made out of lithium, electric cars are made out of lithium, and China wants to take over this also here in Peru, which is also one of the top 3 countries with lithium deposits in the world. And finally, you see these electric posts. There's a company, Enel, that currently owns the electricity in Peru, the electricity distribution company, and there was a Chinese company that offered $3 billion to buy the company. So even the light in our houses could be from China. So we have the enemy actually at home. Next, please. So we need America to take the lead in private investment. Actually, this is what international investment looks like in Peru. Our main commercial partner is China. The US was our main commercial partner 10 years ago, but it isn't anymore. We've lost that battle, or you've lost that battle more than 10 years ago. And I think this repeats in whole Latin America. Brazil now commerces more with China than with the US. Colombia commerces more than China with the US. So this is very preoccupying for us, and we believe American investor, American businesses need to come back to Peru. From Congress, we work very hard to attract investors. However, the political turmoil is not a good incentive for bringing American investors. However, you're leaving the field empty for China to come in. So that's one very important message I want to share with you. We want growth, we want free markets, and we are very sure that the United States of America is the right country to do that, not China. Next, please. This is another chart that shows how much China is growing in Peru. They have like increased their investment by 10 times, and I don't think this is going to halt. This is going to increase, while American investment is lowering. Next, please. This is what can the American conservative movement do to help Latin America and Peru? I think you play a huge role in helping us out. Next, please. And this is the answer. You need to help us empower and train principled conservatives abroad. Replicate the Leadership Institute mission in Latin America. And there is also a quote I want to share from Morton Blackwell. In the same address, he said the following: "We need to reach out to people across the world who are conservative in the American sense of the word, to train them in leadership and help them organize powerful conservative organizations and institutions in their country." And in what I'm going to say you, I want to be very sincere. I believe the 3 months I spent in Washington, D.C., here at the Leadership Institute, definitely changed my life. And I think this is shared by Alejandro and Bernardo. You can really change the life and the course of a conservative activist, a principled conservative activist, just by giving us opportunities to come here to learn from you in the period of even 3 months, and what can do is amazing. We have a 30-year-old congressman here sitting with us, and I think that is amazing, and maybe couldn't have been possible without the Leadership Institute. I don't know, Alejandro, maybe. So that is remarkable, and we need to replicate these efforts because they really do matter, and they have tangible effects in our country. Next, please. So just to finish, I want to show you some numbers of what is going on in the non-profit world in Latin America. This is a pie chart. This is actually the result of a personal investigation. I entered this GuideStar 990 forums, which come from the IRS. This is data from 2018. However, it's still valid, of course. And this is what's going on in Latin America. These are the funds allocated by non-profit organizations to South America. 88 million in total, from which 90% are progressive. So yearly, $80 million are being entered to Latin America to fund progressive organizations. Of course, this means these are pro-abortion organizations, anti-US organizations, socialist organizations, anti-mining, violent organizations that are being funded. But this, guys, please, next. We have Soros money in Peru, the biggest funder of leftist organizations in Latin America by 54%, with $43 million yearly, is George Soros through its Open Society organization. They're messing with our judiciary system. They're messing with our universities. They're messing with our culture. And I believe the conservative movement here in the US is not doing much of the work. 90% by the left, only 10% by the right. So this is, I really want to give like a wake-up call to the conservative movement here in the US that you are losing the battle in the south of the border from you. We have Soros, we have Ford Foundations, and it is really little what we can do as conservative activists in Peru if we have an uneven playing field. We are very motivated, we want to win. I think we have the capacity, we have the expertise, but it's really very hard if we have playing field like this. So just to end, please be sure that we will keep fighting. We will try to win. However, I think you need to help us a little bit more because doing this work alone is very hard. We want to fight against China. We want to fight against communism. We want to fight against progressivism. But we also need you to help us in that battle. Thank you very much.
Well, firstly, I'd like to begin thanking the LI for this amazing organization, thanking Morton for your kind invitation, and thank you all for being here. I'll be very brief because I know we're running out of time. So I will now speak about LI Peru. Next, please. So, well, we began our activities in 2020 after the three of us completed our internships here. To date, we have organized more than 30 political trainings, and in total, we've had 2,500 people attending our events. Well, because of COVID restrictions in Peru, we've organized most of our events and our trainings online. So, next, please. So, well, these are some of our workshops we have organized: how to run a campaign, how to make a speech, how to write a column. So we've been organizing trainings on how to be more effective in the political process. Next, please. One of our main events was a congressional candidate school where we invited 18 candidates to Congress in 2021 who assisted with their campaign managers, and 5 of them got elected to Congress, which was a huge success of the school. And from all the experts who taught there, including Ron Niren as well, we had a lot of international speakers who spoke in that school. Next, please. We've also run some conservatives, interviews with conservatives, where we spoke about activism and leadership. And, well, this year we plan to continue doing activities, to run youth leadership schools, more political workshops, and to continue training conservatives on how to be more effective on the political process. Next, please. So, well, thank you all for being here. We'd love to hear your questions if we have time to. I don't know.
Thank you.
My first question is, which one of you three extremely well-dressed and well-trained individuals is going to be the next president of Peru?
Being president of Peru is kind of dangerous now. We don't know.
You could end up in jail.
Walking out on the streets of Arlington is too.
We can.
In your presentation, you mentioned 2 different words, rivals and enemies. What is the difference? Who is the enemy and who is the rival?
I used this word with China part I spoke about. I thought of, and I named that part of my presentation rival. I do believe it is an enemy, but it is a paradox for conservative to push this point. Why? Because Chinese investment is giving jobs to, I think, thousands and thousands of Peruvians. It is bad investments. We would prefer that being American investment. However, Peruvian culture and Peruvian citizens are each and every day thanking more China because they give job, they create some sort of prosperity, which is in the geopolitical game is very toxic. However, I thought not calling enemy a China vote for me is, but I thought of what China does, it's creating jobs. However, the objective is not to that come from China, but it should be the US and other countries. I didn't use that term. I think Alejandro wants to.
Good morning. My name is Walter. It is pleasant to see you. Just comment and maybe question. In order to have it, what you just discussed is understanding what is red capitalism and black capitalism, and figure out how to teach the free market economy, which was based in United States, success. Because China is not communist country. China is a red capitalist, and in South America, Central America, and other parts of the world, we have a black capitalist. And why I say that? You always, and we cannot forget, the people, the working class, because that's what the Soros is using. He is a red capitalist, nothing more. And that's what I want to see, if you can persuade the young generation and yourself to teach how it was, not anymore, how it was in US, in the free market economy with limited government operation.
I think when you say black capitalism, you refer to illegal economies, right? Or no?
No. Look at what happened. Peso, I call him black capitalist. All these people who have and not have. What's happening in Central America? You have a 1% rich, powerful people, who rest have nothing. I have been there also. These people are suffering because of the leaders, the black capitalists, control everything. The rest cannot even have a businesses because they control everything. And anybody who is elected.
Yes, in Peru, for example, it's interesting because the narrative of the left in our country was like that. You know, oh, the rich is having everything, the poor is having nothing. You know, Peru is a very centralized country. 12 million people of the 30 million people in Peru live in the capital. So they manage this narrative very well. But the truth is that throughout the last 30 years in Peru, the revenue of the 10% richer in Peru had only increased around 9%. But the revenue of the 10% poorer had increased around 60%. So, which means that the model had been around 6 times more successful to the poor than to the rich. But they never say that, you know. They never tell you that because, again, we thought that the economic growth by itself would do the political work, and it is not like that. You have to tell them, oh, you have this increase in your pocket because capitalism, individual liberties, constitutional rights, etc., etc. You know, so people are not getting consciousness of that, and obviously there's a lot of funding from the left to not tell that narrative or to tell another narrative or to come with also I wanted to add that Chinese capital is also very compromised with corruption in Latin America, very compromised with corruption. If you see Brazil and the Sao Paulo Forum, even though it wasn't directly Chinese capital, it was kind of the same model, you know. How do you think they got all these mines and ports and whatever? So it's kind of like Odebrecht, like that, you know. So it's compromising leaders in Latin America to give them strategic industries, you know. So that's something we have to look at very closely.
We got one over here. We got one over here.
A great presentation. Thank you very much. 2 quick points and a question. One, Eduardo, you made a great point about the importance of the American conservative movement, civil society to invest in the region, to push back against the left. As you probably know, historically, the American left has always been pouring resources into Latin America. Morton's done a great job in trying to counter that. Well, my question is to you in public policy, what do you want the U.S. government to do? I'm talking about State Department, our intelligence services. You can make a case, as conservatives do, that we have been unsuccessful in our attempts to push back Chavez, Venezuela, etc. We have not had the rising red pink tide is there. Our government seems incapable. This administration is hopeless, of course, but what do you advise a new conservative administration to do with our state institutions in Latin America?
I think what's most important in Peru and also in Latin America in general is that conservatives would only achieve goals in peaceful times. When there's revolts, protests, violence on the streets, that's when the left takes all the advantage, because they're more organized to do that and to be violent and to catch more fish when the river it's moving, So right now, I think the priority for Peru is stabilize. Right now, we've got rid of, because we got a right-wing Congress that believes in democracy, and our military respects our constitution, and democracy prevailed in my country because of the fight we gave. Right now, the left is very angry because they're out of power, of course. So they're trying to burn everything up in the country. So we need to stabilize in order for the government to show some results, for the new government of President Boluarte to be able to do something and get out of this violent protest agenda and have some sort of time period that allows her to show some results and to stabilize and to be able to have some things done in Peru. The left is asking very hardly right now for new elections as soon as possible in Peru. I think that's very irresponsible. I think President Boluarte has to finish her mandate until 2026 in order to have some peace and some time for stabilization in Peru. But I think at the beginning, the American embassy was one of the first to recognize President Boluarte as Peru's new president. Colombia didn't do that, Mexico didn't do that, Bolivia didn't do that, Argentina didn't do that. Only Brazil and the United States were the ones that recognized her right away. The others had to do it, kind of like not because they wanted, but because they had to. I think that the American embassy was the first to do that, but at the same time, American embassy supported calling elections right away. And I thought, no, that's not the solution. That's very irresponsible. You're putting more instability in a country that's already unstabilized. So I think that's something that maybe the State Department could change.
Oh. Hi. I'll never forget, before the war in Iraq, either of them, I saw on the news that American soldiers were killed in the Middle East, and they were killed. The location they chose was a porn shop frequented by the soldiers. And I went to a lot of think tank talks down here in Washington, and a lot of the outreach, foreign outreach, seems to be focused on the feminist movement, getting people, women to work, abortion, birth control, and things like this. I wondered, in terms of your country, is this something that's helpful, a helpful way to outreach to your country, or can it be offensive at times? Thank you.
How the non-profit organizations' investments in Peru, or how to fight against this, like pro-abortion, pro-birth, from our side?
Somebody said to me, China brings money and building and jobs, and we bring birth control and a changed way of life.
Yeah, I get it. So what China is doing good and what America is doing bad, right?
Depending on your country.
Yes, I do think progressive have won a battle here in the U.S., which is the cultural battle. So just the same as you, we have critical race theory in our universities. It is coming. We have DEI in our universities, which are coming. This is a new concept. When I was an intern here, there was only CRT. Now, some months ago, I learned about DEI, diversity, equality, inclusion. So the most important companies in Peru are turning woke. The most important universities and faculties are progressives. And many of this, the transgender movement, many of this is what young Peruvians see where in social media. Most of the content of social media comes from the US. Most of our movies, most of the music the young hear is from Hollywood, from California. We watch the Oscars, we watch the Grammys, we watch the NFL. Everything what the left is doing bad in culture, what is printing, we know it, and this is something bad that America is exporting to us.
Thank you. My name is Guadalupe. I am from Ecuador, so I know, I understand what you're going through. My question for the Congress right now is, what is the law are creating to protect the workers? Because I have been in China, I know how the leadership is over there. They don't care about the lives of individual. But if you protect the workers with a good salary, because you need to find out what is this, the life standard of the worker. Believe me, if you work, you protect the workers under the Chinese company, they're going to run away from Peru. Thank you.
Yes, and I also want to point that Peru has a very world-known economist who's Hernando de Soto. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote a book called The Mystery of Capital, which basically was based on his studies in Peru during the 80s, which kind of proved, as Eduardo said, that actually people in Latin America, especially in Peru, want to be capitalist, basically but they want to be capitalist, but they can't because the state puts them so many regulations and so many restrictions for them to access to capital, basically, in terms of access to credit, access to property, access to free markets around the world. So basically, Hernando, which by the way, was the presidential candidate with whom I was elected. I run to office, him for president, me to Congress. So basically, in Peru, around 80% of our economy, it's informal. It doesn't follow the laws that come from Congress. Basically but that doesn't mean they don't have law. They have another type of law which is easier to execute. That's why they follow it. So basically, I think that we need to, as you said, protect the workers, but more than protect them, we have to integrate them to the economy. We have to make them capitalist in all the sense of the word, where they have to be able to access to credit, to access to markets, to access to property, be able to follow simple and easy laws that are tied with reality instead of thought in perfect utopical world. And once we do that, I think if people feels part of the system, they feel part of the system because they can participate on it and create capitalism with capitalists all over the world, I think we could achieve something good. Thank you.
I thank you so much. This was very interesting. It opened up a lot of eyes, and we're certainly proud of what you are doing, and I intend that the Leadership Institute will continue to support you with educational efforts. You can see how thrilling it is to work with fine people like this. Some years ago, we started Leadership Institute Chile, or a former intern did, and that is a large and effective operation, and has been of assistance to the Leadership Institute Peru. We have an institute in France founded by an intern of close to 30 years ago, the Institut de Formation Politique, and they are very effective. The head of it had the good sense to marry a very attractive development officer of the and so they've had success. They own their own building and are doing great work. This is slow work, and anybody involved in this work has to be the sort of person who can get satisfaction of things that take a long time to come to fruition. Because when you're doing leadership training, the good that is done over a period of the lifetimes of the people that you have worked with. So it's highly satisfactory. Not everybody is willing to do it. I use this analogy. I've learned how to grow peach trees from peach pits. I learned how to, experimented, found out how to get the peach pits to germinate, and then they sprout up. But it's 6 or 7 years before there's the slightest chance of picking a peach off of that tree. Somebody has to plant them, those seeds, or we're not going to have any peaches. But the sad fact is, many people do not have the patience to grow radishes. You can take a radish seed and plant it, and 8 or 10 weeks later you can harvest that. But most people don't have the patience even to spend 8 or 10 weeks with something of a short duration. We're doing things that take a long time to come to fruition, but it is, for many of us, and I think virtually all of us in this room, are the sort of people who can undertake projects, put out time, talent, and money, knowing that the good results are likely to be years and years in the future. But it works. It works. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you all very much. When you were here as interns, you probably saw a number of people have these Leadership Institute mugs that I have the laws of the public policy process on, and I have dug out 3 complete sets of 4 mugs each that have all the laws on them, and I invite you to take them with you when you go, and here they are. Kirk, if you would hand it. Great. What? Oh, they want to get us close together with you all holding the bulky boxes. You'll have to explain them to everybody you show the picture to. Great. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Look forward to chatting with you all later. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I want to thank you all for coming. I invite you to join us on April 5th for our next Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast with Tim Gagline of Focus on the Family. And I encourage you to RSVP online at leadershipinstitute.org/breakfast. Anna Kraus, will you please step up here? I invite anyone interested in a tour of this, our Stephen P.J. Wood building, and the Emerson and Dolores Wright Center for Campus Reform to meet with. Whoops, we got the names wrong. You're going to do the tour, okay? She'll give you a great tour of the Leadership Institute, and she's ready to answer any questions that you might have along the tour. And if she can't answer a tough question that you ask, she'll pop up to my office and ask me. All right. Thank you all so much for coming today. pleasure.